It's a joke. It's all a joke. Hey, welcome back to the Ping Pong Flick Show. My name is Chris Wong. Before I get into that, let's get a little update from yesterday's video in regards to Birds of Prey. Remember we talked about where it's Birds of Prey, possibly it's going to be Birds of Prey versus Gotham City Sirens, but it wasn't clear if that was the sequel or is that the Birds of Prey movie because we don't know who's going to be acting as Poison Ivy or Catwoman or Batgirl. So what's it gonna be? Well, apparently, this is coming from GWW, also from Daniel RPK, from his Patreon account, and Discussing Film had is writing about this. They're saying that Warner Brothers are reportedly pursuing a Harley Quinn trilogy consisting of Birds of Prey, Gotham City Sirens, and then finally Birds of Prey versus Gotham City Sirens. So it's like a whole connective between Harley Quinn characters through three different movies. Now, it could all change if Birds of Prey flops and doesn't get off the ground, if you will. So but if it does do good, it looks like Margot Robbie and her production crew want to continue pursuing the later chapters in Harley Quinn's trilogy, which is Gotham City Sirens and Birds of Prey versus Gotham City Sirens. Unclear, and probably not going to be a David Ayer doing Gotham City Sirens, which is sad to see because he started it kind of. I don't know how far he got in production, but he kind of put that idea out. But looks like Margot Robbie did like the idea of having those movies, and so we'll see how that goes. We'll see if it with the success of Birds of Prey, if they're going to continue that route, or what is DCEU's plan altogether. Now, what Neil Daly, he is a Warner Brothers, I want to say, is an independent contractor, freelance for Warner Brothers. And he's like a media analyst. What he does, he grabs all these different test audiences to test films, test Warner Brother films. I don't know if it's just Warner Brother films. Like, I wasn't quite clear, but he was on the podcast of Fire and Water, episode 223. I'll link that entire podcast in my description below, and this will be the focus of my video today. Lots of information that came out of that podcast, and which I would try to divulge the most important parts, and in this case, things that you guys would be probably interested in the entire drama of what he's calling it Worlds of DC. Remember Worlds of DC? We kind of got a hint of that at San Diego Comic-Con. Then people are like, that's not what it's called, Worlds of DC. It's still called the DCEU. Gal Gadot calls it the DCEU. Zachary Levi calls it the DCEU. A lot of people call it the DCEU. It kind of rolls off the tongue better than Worlds of DC. But according to Neil Daly, he wanted to call it the Worlds of DC. I don't think it's just sticking yet, but that's what he wanted to call it. Now, he has test screened multiple versions of Justice League, multiple versions of what am I talking about? Aquaman, and he can't divulge too much, but possibly Shazam and other films down in the line. But because Aquaman's done and Justice League's done, I guess he can finally talk about it. And he put a lot of things out there. I want to go back to Justice League. Actually, no. Let's go into Aquaman first because that's the current movie. So he talks about Aquaman, talks about how it's mostly a James Wan film. But he also says that before Walter Hamada and all the crew, Jeff Johns, Toby Emmerich, this original crew during the Justice League time had a lot of say into what Aquaman was going to be. And there was a lot of infighting between them. And in a lot of those discussions, after they do the test screening, Neil Daly would be in the same room at the theaters, or I don't know where, at the same room, saying what this test the audience likes. This is what aspects they like and did not like. And Jeff Johns would put his input, and he would fight with the creative team a lot, and that just and it would drive the direction that Warner Brothers was going to take for these films going on, right? So Aquaman had that same problem. Aquaman, in terms of James Wan, they wanted Aquaman to be in line of to what the character of Aquaman was in Justice League, or should I say Justice League, the Joss Whedon version. It's a very, in one part where he kind of objectifies women in a way. So this is kind of what he said about that. He said Whedon was behind much of Justice League's teenage boy sexual humor. This includes gags like Aquaman hitting on Wonder Woman while under the influence of the lasso of truth. Wan didn't want this approach in Aquaman. Daly explained, "We could have gotten a whole movie about Aquaman basically fawning over Mera the whole time and making all kinds of dirty jokes and things like that. And that they really had to get away from that, which is all what Whedon had done." So Snyder had a little bit of an influence on Aquaman. James Wan was showing Zack Snyder, against the studio wishes, cuts of the movie in early test screenings and storyboards to make sure that they're on the same page with what he originally wanted, and Snyder gave his blessing of approval, bringing it back to what he wanted all along. So we got a little bit of vindication for Zack Snyder here, after all the things that happened to Justice League said and done, that Aquaman, ultimately his character is reeled in back to kind of where Zack Snyder wanted. At least he approved of this version of him more than what Jeff Johns and company wanted from Aquaman, and more that Joss Whedon type of Aquaman is no longer to be found in this version. Although we have to actually talk about the jokes that are in the movie. The jokes that are in the movie was because the studio wanted a little bit more comedy. So there is some concessions that James Wan had to make in order to get this film off the ground. And for the most part, he played ball with the studio, adding in the you could have just peed on it line and things, little jokes here and there. So this is all coming from Neil Daly. And that is really saddening to hear this because of the studio intervention. We knew about studio intervention, but we didn't know how far it got and what they actually look for. These test audiences a lot of power in order to make or break a movie or change a movie, in fact. Change a movie, making these directors make these giant or small to giant concessions, so in order to have those ratings and things like that. And this is just part of that whole corporate, this whole films by committee deal, right? Including a 2-hour mandate. Aquaman was originally going to be 3 hours, and James Wan wanted to cut it down, and they wanted to do a 2-hour mandate. But because of Justice League's 2-hour, incredibly rushed type of movie, the studio went back to James Wan and says, "Never mind, do what you want, but 3 hours is going to be long." So, and James Wan apparently thought 3 hours was going to be long. He wanted to cut something out. And one of those was Black Manta's story. He felt that Black Manta's story could have been a whole sequel in itself. But Jeff Johns said no. He actually argued and said, and you can cut anything else but Black Manta because he's my favorite character. But when you compare it to the test audiences and things, the test audiences that Neil Daly had collected, they felt that Black Manta's story didn't quite fit into Aquaman. He was unnecessary in terms of the whole scheme of events. And for that point, I think he's right. And you could have had some terrorists at the beginning. Then you could have had King Orm's men fight him in Greece. It would have been the same. They didn't really need Black Manta for the round. It was a good setup, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't needed, and they could have cut out something else. Maybe. I kind of like the movie how it is, but hearing that Jeff Johns had these big decisions, and ultimately probably that's why he got fired for doing from all these decisions that he made, he kind of just wrecked it all. And that gets me into Justice League because of Jeff Johns and Warner Brothers. Zack Snyder, who was heading this whole thing, had to change a lot of things. And in fact, we are now being revealed that Zack Snyder wanted solo movies before a Justice League movie. This is very interesting. He originally still wanted that film arc, and according to Neil Daly, it was actually going to be a 6-part arc, starting with Man of Steel, Batman v Superman. Then ultimately he will do a Justice League, Man of Steel 2, then a Justice League Part 2 and Part 3. Now that doesn't mean it was going to be an arc that stuck together, which we originally thought he wanted to do. According to Neil Daly, he was definitely going to do those movies. But Justice League was going to be after all these other solo films like Aquaman and Flash and Wonder Woman and all these other movies have their introduction first. But because of Warner Brother and Jeff Johns, they were really trying to catch up to Marvel. They really try to catch up to Marvel, and they ordered Zack Snyder to do Justice League right away. Ultimately, it was their downfall, I feel. But to make matters worse, they changed Justice League altogether. They changed it. They brought in Joss Whedon. The rest is history. And it was all because of Warner Brothers, and they really fell flat on their face. The bad part is they really put Zack Snyder under the bus. Just from what Neil Daly is talking, they really threw him under the bus, and they were going to throw James Wan under the bus if this had failed as well. I believe they would. But Walter Hamada came in, and I'm thinking they found out what a douche Jeff Johns was. You're good at writing. Get out of this studio. Go back to your writing. We'll approve your story. When we want to approve your story, you are no longer in charge of this universe. He really thought he was going to be the Kevin Feige, but ultimately he failed. And that's sad, because we would have gotten to that point if we would have gotten through Superman's arc. We would have gotten a Superman that type of Superman that most people who didn't want that brooding Superman, they would have got that type of Boy Scout Superman eventually. He was just going through the arc. The audience and the studio just didn't have the patience for it. They just didn't want to hear his story. They wanted to get it straight to the point already, and ultimately that didn't work as well. But what is most compelling and probably frustrating that came out of all these test screenings, is that when they actually had a survey for each of the characters on who they thought was the best. Now, they're looking at the characters after the Justice League movie now. So from that Justice League movie, it said that the audience were more invested in Wonder Woman. Then second, Flash and Aquaman. Then Cyborg. Then at the very bottom was neck to neck Batman and Superman. What is wrong with this? What world are we living in where the least interesting characters was Batman and Superman? Now, granted, this was coming after Justice League. They watched Justice League in the theaters, and that's the survey. From that, from what I'm feeling now about Justice League, I can kind of understand that. You got some Superman with the lip gate, and you got Batman who is like a joke. Then I can totally see that they're being like, that's not the version that we like, where we don't care about those. I want to see about Wonder Woman because we're writing off of Wonder Woman. We want to see a little bit of Aquaman, which tested well with men and women. Flash was a kind of a funny relief, and then Cyborg. But the bad thing about that is that they're using that to determine their movies from now on. That's why Aquaman came out first. That's why Wonder Woman 1984 was already in production. And then that's why they're going to do the Flash movie. And that's why we're not going to see a Batman movie or even mention a Superman movie from a long time now. And if that was really true, then where's that Cyborg movie, right? But it's just so frustrating to see. Do audiences really do not care about Superman and Batman anymore? And that is the reason why Warner Brothers is not really putting a lot of effort and money and investing and getting those contracts for these actors to come back to fulfill those roles as Batman and Superman anymore because of that test audience. I mean, it just blows my mind. But I get it. This is how Hollywood movie works. They rely on these statistics and ratings and test audiences, these random test audiences. But there's got to be some reasoning, a little bit more reasoning behind it. And now you're hearing from like Mark Hughes, which I don't know if he's the best of small. I mean, he said Aquaman was a mess, and it turned out it wasn't. But he said that they're now focusing on Supergirl being the Kryptonian solo flagship, if you will, other than Superman. And it's probably because of the CW shows. Who knows? But I just think what world do we live in? Right? Where Superman and Batman are on the back burner. Like, what world do we? I don't get it. It's a joke. It's all a joke. I mean, it's terrible, and it's I don't know. I can't. I don't have the words for it. But I hope that this new crew are doing more surveys and test screenings and whatever have you that gets you to get the word out that Superman is definitely something people want. Batman is definitely something people want. And ultimately, we want to get the Snyder Cut as well. Just might as well. And because if Aquaman is totally in line with what they're saying the Snyder Cut is, how the ending, Neil Daly did confirm that the ending of the Zack Snyder's Justice League did have Aquaman talking to Vocal and Mera, which connects to Aquaman, then it should be no big of a problem, right? It ends up with the heroes going their separate ways. That should be it's not a big of a problem to release that, right? And people want to say that Aquaman and James Wan did have a big hand in Aquaman, but the character was first conceived by Zack Snyder, and Jason Momoa himself is not going to let us forget that. Is not going to let the studio forget that. Mr. $1 billion superhero film said, he put this out on Instagram. I am Aquaman in caps because of Zack Snyder. He is a legend in my eyes. He made a Justice League T-shirt. All the gods to support suicide awareness and prevention. Honored to do my part to support my Ohana, which means family, by the way. I love you, Zach and Debbie. Link in bio. Aloha. Say Jason, J as for Jason. So he is openly supporting this. Openly supporting Zack Snyder, openly supporting the Snyder Cut, and I hope that means something. I really do hope it means something. And I'm gonna end it with this: that Zack Snyder probably still wants to see a Snyder Cut. Ramesh De Silva, who makes incredible fan art, put this picture out of Justice League like a DVD or a Blu-ray, either way, but a physical copy of it, and he said he hopes, right? And Zack Snyder liked that picture. He wouldn't like that picture if he didn't want it, right? He wants it as just as much as we do, and I hope he finally gets it to be released one way or another. And the last thing I want to talk about Neil Daly, that what he said in regards to Snyder Cut, that they asked him, it sounds like you know about the Snyder Cut, and he did allude, saying that he did know about. In fact, saying that the actual opening of Zack Snyder's Justice League started with the history lesson rather than that history lesson being the middle. And I kind of thought about that. I kind of felt that that was going to be the case. I even read about it a long time ago. But it's great to hear him say that, meaning a lot of those fan edits that start with that works out perfectly. And I mean, it kind of, it kind of, what do you call it? It's not in sync with what other people have said. The opening should be Batman or Bruce Wayne finding Aquaman, but I could still see that both work. And in the version that this guy saw, which should be probably the more final version before Joss Whedon stepped in. As we've said, this is the guy who arranges test screenings for all the different versions, from the junk storyboard version to the almost final version. So you gotta kind of believe him in a way, but I can totally see it starting with the history lesson. Then it goes into the snowy mountains. It pans in, and it's Bruce Wayne on a horse. You get that could totally be the case. So it's part of the opening. But in any case, he did say that when the podcast people asked him, do you know do you know about the Snyder Cut, and if there is a Zack Snyder Cut? And he asked him, well, he kind of got silent. He's laughing, and he's like, just reword that question for me. And so the podcaster asked, do you know if there is a Zack Snyder Cut? And he said, yes, I do know if there is a Snyder Cut. So he doesn't. The interesting part is he doesn't say no for something that would not happen, would not exist. You could have just say no. Unfortunately, we'll never see the Snyder Cut. Unfortunately, no, there's no Snyder Cut. But he laughed about it. He laughed, and he says he does know if there is a Snyder Cut. And he said emphasis on if. So if anything, that should give us just a little bit of tangible hope. Maybe, just maybe, he arranged a test screening for the Snyder Cut. Who knows? Anyway, thank you so much for subscribing. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.